Welcome to the Circuit of Success Podcast.
The Circuit of Success Podcast.
With your host, Brett
Gilliland. Brett Gilliland, Visionary Wealth Advisory.
The Circuit of Success Podcast. Let's start the show.
Welcome to the Circuit of Success. I am your host, Brett Gilliland. Today I've got Sarah Tourville with me. Sarah, how we doing?
We're doing great. Thanks so much for having me today.
Thanks for being here. It's been a long time coming.
I know. We've only talked about it for about 18 months or so.
Well, you've had a little job change.
That's right.
You know, you've had a lot going on. Seeing our friends, PK and Kristen, go on some trips. Well, it's good to have you. You are the Executive Vice President of Team Partnerships for FanDuel Sports Network. The way I explained it to somebody would be, I just wrote these teams down: the Kansas City Royals, Pacers, Angels, Los Angeles Kings, Los Angeles Clippers, our beloved St. Louis Cardinals and Blues, just to name a few. And so, like I said, you are the Executive Vice President of Team Partnerships. But before we dive into all that great stuff, I told you today the first question is always the same. People are probably bored by this by now. But what has helped make you the woman you are today?
I think, I'm sure you hear this quite often. It's really the people that have supported me through my career, whether it be from more from a parental perspective through my father. My dad grew up in the media business, but he also primarily raised us on his own. And so the impact he had in just establishing good character and empathy and kindness certainly set the path to make sure that the relationships I fostered were strong ones. And so I've just been really lucky. I've been working almost 30 years, primarily in sports, and at each place that I've worked, there's been one or two people that really stand out. And ironically, most of them are men. Probably not a full surprise, just being that the sports industry remains to be dominated. But just someone that went out of their way to really mentor and guide me. And so I hold that as a priority for myself to ensure that I'm doing that for the next generation of leaders. Absolutely.
So what did your dad do in the entertainment business?
My dad grew up, everything from sales, but I would say he's most recognized for his time in radio. So he ran KMOX radio for a long time. Then he bought a signal actually over here in Illinois, WIBV, to be a competitor to KMOX. Eventually established the Big 550, it's KTRS. And so he was able to secure the Cardinals, the Blues for a period of time, Mizzou. And, knew everything from media to advertising. But what you would know him for most was that he was just a great guy. And he still is a great guy. And he's just fun to be with. And so his success was all built on relationships.
Did you know you wanted to be in the sports world then because of what he was doing?
No, I studied, I thought I was going to go to law school. I was a psychology and social work major. Thought I was going to save young kids' lives through, a guardian ad litem type of position. And I went to Miami of Ohio, and probably by the time I was a senior in high school, the psychology had helped me figure out enough things, but it wasn't a path that I knew I wanted to pursue. And really started becoming interested in sports marketing and advertising. Kind of dream job was, work for a big brand that worked with the Olympics, or you saw the Nikes of the world, and was able then to take a path down the sports media.
I think I saw you worked for Fox and ESPN?
Yeah, I actually started my career at ESPN when they just had the regional sports networks. That was a pretty short stint. Went on to work for a few big cable entertainment companies, the Discovery Network. So if you knew Steve Irwin back in the day, we loved the Croc Hunter. I worked for Discovery. I worked for Landmark Communications, which owned a handful of networks, and then found my way to ESPN at a time where all of the various mediums, whether it be audio, TV, mobile, were all run separately. And we brought that all together during my time, and I ended up running the Midwest office for about 13 years. And then found my way to Fox Sports on the national side. And I worked there for about 7 years, both incredible jobs, totally different cultures, but such great people and great properties. I've had the privilege of working with everything from the NFL to Major League Baseball to World Cup, helping launch some women's sports. And then I found my way to a connection to the owner of the Kansas City Royals. And at that time, he was aggregating a group of local Kansas City businessmen and women to purchase the Kansas City Royals. And so a few months before that acquisition was final, he hired me. And I spent 5.5 years with the Royals until 2 months ago when I joined FanDuel Sports Network.
Well, I saw you at Rock for Hope, and I'm like, hey, it's a Royal thing going. You're like, actually, I'm at FanDuel Sports Network now.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, you never know where your path's going to find. It's honestly the perfect intersection because I spent 20 plus years in sports media. I loved it. I mean, my time at ESPN was formidable. The relationships. I mean, you were kind of the 800-pound gorilla, right? You had every sports franchise. I was controlling hundreds of millions of dollars of ad revenue and working with clients and partners all through the Midwest. And then I went over on the Fox side and it was more like utilizing the creative side of how are we going to monetize this awesome content. But the fun part about FanDuel Sports Network is my 5.5 years of the team of understanding the world they live in of performance metrics every day. Did you sell enough tickets? Did the team win or lose? Did you get enough people to, spend money on retail and concessions? So having that knowledge of the teams actually makes this job makes sense, more suitable for me. And now we're living in a really challenging world where sports fans can't find their favorite teams. You might have to log in to 5 different platforms. So I saw that challenge with the Royals firsthand, and I think this job allows, hopefully FanDuel Sports Network has the opportunity to become the best local streaming source for fans. Yeah. And makes it a lot easier for you to find your favorite team.
So talk about that for a little bit, if you will, because I'm that person, right? So I'm a big Cardinal fan, have been my whole life, and now I've got, I guess we can name drop TVs here, but YouTube TV. But then I keep my Charter Spectrum just for the streaming part so I can watch a Cardinals and a Blues game, right? And so, what do you see, maybe that's 1 year or 5 years from now, the fan like me that has, to your point, dial in all these different, what do you see there?
I wish I knew. I just know that it can't be this complicated. Yeah. If you think about the world when we went from 4 broadcast stations to hundreds of cable stations, then you started to bundle all those cable stations together in a package. Right. Now you're seeing the younger generations who are not going to pay an astronomical amount of money for cable because they want what they want when they want it. So they want this very personalized experience, as you alluded to. Most people our age, most people younger than us will never have cable. They'll never pay a cable bill. And so for them, companies like ours have to assure that we're aligned with the right platforms. And right now, unfortunately, you have to be on many platforms. So we still have to be reliant on the cable world. Most people 45 and above are still watching something through cable, or they're authenticating it on their cable app. But secondarily, YouTube is one of the biggest challenges. I would say it's high on FanDuel Sports Network's priority because they have historically not been in the world of paying rights, especially for sports content. And themselves and also Hulu, I think you'll see them probably approach the marketplace with a tiering. So instead of just one bundle and you pay X amount of money, you have that opportunity on YouTube to purchase at higher levels, your teams, your sports.
And you think it'll be, sorry to interrupt, do you think it'll be specific to say, okay, you're going to buy through YouTube TV just the Cardinals, or?
Well, most of these platforms are all geofenced by your zip code. Okay. Yep. So to keep the local content valuable, that's the best way to protect it. But if you're in Kansas City, for example, you might be able to watch the Royals, Oklahoma City Thunder, and the St. Louis Blues. But here in St. Louis, we want to be maximizing St. Louis teams. And that right now we have the rights to both the Blues and the Cardinals. Yep. I think then it becomes, how do you complement that with your over-the-air stations? So you've seen the Cardinals and the Blues both use Gray Media. You'll know them as KMOV or Matrix, to try to simulcast to expand their reach to a larger audience, because we've heard that complaint. But I think come back to your question, it's going to be on some sort of digital platform, which means you have to produce your content differently and you have to package it differently and more affordable.
So then the Charters of the world, now they've got this whole game, that's probably the exciting part of your job, right?
It is.
You're in the forefront of what's going on right now.
And the Charters of the world are so important, but they're watching people migrate, and they're continuing to increase the price to mitigate the churn of people no longer renewing their cable subscriptions. So eventually they become much more, I'm not sure that the cable infrastructure that exists all over the world is going to mean anything if everything's coming through a digital platform.
Yeah. Well, we have an Airbnb, and what's nice about the other stuff, like, Charter, you can't have them in all these different locations, but other places you can, and I think that's, something for people to be thinking about as well. So I know we can go travel on and on and on about that, right. But this is about you and your career, and so when you think about your mindset that you've lived with, maybe since you were a child, I don't know, but how do you think you formed your mindset and then your thinking? Like, we all have that self-thinking, whether that's good or bad thinking sometimes. How do you think you formed that over the years?
I love this question. I think probably my mindset is curiosity. There's just a desire in me to always learn something new and different. And it probably stemmed from resilience, right, of whatever situations we found ourselves in as a kid, whether it was the pecking order of where you were, or the situation of your parents, and the people around you. But that I think I never took for granted the opportunities that I had, whether that was, my college education or studying abroad, and saw that there was just so many, there wasn't one thing that excited me, probably to a fault. Like, I sort of thrive on that chaos of it all. But the curiosity, I mean, I look at our parents, right, and suddenly they don't know how to use their phones, or they stop reading, or they stop learning, they stop listening. And I don't want to be that. Like, there's so many things I love to do, which is why I've started a fitness franchise in my career, why I've leaned in on philanthropic work and how do you excite yourself, because it just makes you, there's so many great people out there to extract and learn from. That excites me all the time.
Think about my parents, that we gave them an Apple TV for Christmas one time, and then about 2 months later, they just like, here, you guys can have it. It's like, this is too difficult. I'm not doing this.
And think about our kids. Like, they're like, do before they can, even
when the kids were real little, they would blow my parents' minds, my in-laws' minds, when they're like, turning on the iPad and flipping it around. I'm like, geez. So would you say overall, the thinking for you, obviously you don't get to where you're at with a bunch of negative thinking, but when you do, or if you do have that negative self-talk, how do you overcome that, and what do you do to get through it?
Yeah, I think we all have fears and insecurities. It'd be weird if you didn't.
You did not.
For me, it's sort of like failure's not an option, so there's always some sort of plan you can come up with. I think there's been times where I've had self-doubt, and you have to rely on those awesome mentors and resources to talk you through some scenarios. I still am like old school. I go through the pros and the cons and write it down in the middle of the night and think through it. And I mean, it's basics. I think the risk and reward is something like I've always thought through, like, what's the worst thing that can happen? Like, even when I took this job, I left an awesome job. I loved it. I worked for the owner of the Kansas City Royals. I was like, worst case is they go out of business in a couple of years. Well, you still can solve somebody's problem. And in this case, teams' challenges with media. But I think it's also just like humility. I mean, you cannot take yourself too serious. There's too many things we can't predict or control. So, I sort of lean into the chaos instead of let it paralyze me.
It's important.
Yeah.
You like chaos?
I don't love chaos. Like, I'm so anal and so structured. Like, I love a routine. Yeah. But I don't mind the chaos of building something. Okay. And I take it, and I'm like, this excites me and gets me going. And a few months in, I'm like, what did I do this for? Like, this is nuts. This is stupid. There's an easier path. And then again, and like, there's either the people or the challenge. I think I hate being told no, probably fiercely competitive in that way. It's not so much that I don't want to lose. It's just that I want to feel like I tried. And so once I've accepted the stupid task of chaos, there's no way I'm going to turn around and not make it work. Yeah.
Your I will is greater than your I won't.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. Yeah.
What when you think about your competitiveness, were you like that as a kid?
No, but I mean, gosh, you can go into like the psychology of it all. But like, being born a middle kid, I had 2 older brothers, 2 younger sisters. My parents separated like right in the middle of adolescence, and so I think you just. I couldn't get lost in the shuffle. You had to be adaptable, but you also had to make sure that you were heard. So probably just leaning in on that.
The old fight or flight. You chose the fight.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's good.
And still, I think we all know, like, when you're going through fight or flight, and you have those panic moments. But you got to get up and move through it.
Do you do well with balance? Meaning, because I hate the word work-life balance, but you got a lot on your plate, right?
Yeah.
Executive of big companies or a former team, whatever. Do you do well with that? And if not, what do you try to do to get better?
I agree with you. I hate work-life balance. So somebody taught me a long time ago, it's about work-life integration. Yeah. The biggest challenge for me is I feel guilt. I don't know if it's a female thing, but whether it was deciding, to maybe not take some career opportunities that were in front of you because you wanted to have a family, and then constantly, I used the drive to Kansas City for 5.5 years, right? Like the first hour of the drive, I sat there thinking about, were the kids going to have this and their rides and the dog and who ate what and, did I miss a game and how is it going to zoom into the game? And then I hit the halfway point and I start thinking about, oh my gosh, I've got 2.5 days of all these things I need to accomplish in Kansas City while still being mindful. So I think at times my guilt comes from, there is a little bit of selfishness of just needing to take care of yourself. I mean, I definitely lean in. My workouts are finding my own time and my own opportunities, even if that's just with friends. When I don't have that, and everything's out of sort, because you're always going to feel guilty between home and work.
Sure.
So it's sort of like, are you taking care of yourself? And, that's ebbed and flowed. There's definitely times where no, and you've got to self-check. Or you realize you want something different, like you want to slow down. Part of the reason I took this job too was I've got a daughter who's going to be a senior in high school next year. I don't want to look back and have her be like, my mom was an awesome sports executive.
Right.
I want to be at every single one of those moments, or find more time to be with your spouse and partner and the family around you.
Yeah, that's awesome. What habits, you mentioned habits earlier in your workouts and all that stuff. What are the habits that we would find you doing day in and day out?
Gosh, good question. I mean, my day always starts, I'm up pretty early, definitely some sort of physical activity.
Define early.
I'm usually up by like 4:45.
I'd call that early.
4:45, 5. It depends what I'm doing that day. It depends if I went out the night before or had a dinner. But that morning time is sort of coveted. Even when I had younger kids, it was like I needed to be up before they did to sort of compartmentalize everything that was going to happen. I'd say in terms of habit.
Did you get up at 4:45 in Vegas last week?
No, I was definitely not at 4:45. I might have gone to bed at 4:30. I think it's taking a moment I've gotten better of just like reflection, like taking a moment, thinking about, okay, I'm halfway through the week. What have I accomplished? What do I want to accomplish? I'm not good at meditating, but like I have faith. And so finding ways that just works in, that you slow yourself down, even if it's just through a walk with the dogs. And then pretty much my work day is, I know going into my work day what I have to accomplish that day. And I'm pretty regimented about it. But I've gotten better about being more adaptable. Probably to a weakness, though, on days when you find yourselves in meetings all day. You go home, you're with your family for 2 hours, and then I have that terrible habit of logging back in.
Yep.
I'm trying to be better about that. But there's some sort of learning all the time. Like in my business, you're studying the analytics, the performance of viewership. You're reading the trades. What else is going on around you? There's not a day. The first thing I'm not looking at is like, did the Cardinals win? Did the Royals win? Did the Blues win? Who won? Who lost? What are the storylines? So in my world, that's just your general prep for the day.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I'm always mindful of, like in the week, like what did I do for somebody else? Did I take a moment to listen and let somebody complain? Did I attend, a board meeting and offer some assistance? And usually if I don't, like I'm doubling down on that the next week.
And how are you tracking? Do you track it? Like you writing this in a journal? Is it just kind of in your mind? What do you do there?
It kind of ebbs and flows. Like I'll write or like type myself notes all the time. I text myself. It's, I'm just kind of like, as much as it's like, don't forget to do those things. I've gone through phases where I feel like a journal is really impactful. But for me, I'm like a check the box. Did you do this? And so I hold myself more accountable in my notes page on my app.
I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Me and Siri get along real well. Remind me to do this tomorrow at 9:30 in the morning.
She really can be a mess sometimes. Like when all those years I was driving to Kansas City, I'd voice text all the time.
Yes.
And the people would be like, did you just not even read it after you wrote it? That she's dangerous.
I feel like it's gotten worse for some reason.
Yeah.
But maybe it's just the way I speak. I don't know.
No, you have to like text and be like, question mark?
Yeah.
New paragraph?
Right. Yeah, exactly. What risk are you most happy that you took? It was a big, obviously you just did the one with the new job, but you look back in your whole career, was there one risk that you took that was kind of defining moment for you?
Absolutely. I think I'd answer that by saying I was working for ESPN. I had an awesome job. I was living in Chicago. Unfortunately, my marriage was not working out. I had a 6-month-old and a 26-month-old in diapers. And I knew that, like, if I had gotten divorced and ended up in the state of Illinois, I had no friends. I had no family. I had a great, awesome work network, lots of great friends. But the importance of family and, like, that fear of doing this on your own. And in that instance, you likely wouldn't have been able to leave until they were 18 years old.
Right.
So I fought like hell and convinced my ex-husband that we would both move back to St. Louis. It was not an easy decision at all. And I'm grateful that he leaned in eventually and we made that decision together, because I think it's provided just an awesome environment for our kids to grow up around family and their cousins. Yeah. And it allowed me to then pursue work later. I mean, I left my job at ESPN. I mean, people thought I was having a midlife crisis. Like, sold my house, got a divorce, 2 kids in diapers, moved to St. Louis, buy a franchise to a fitness studio, and leave this awesome job. And move in with my dad, not to mention. Like, it's like you're 30.
She's gone off the deep end.
She's crazy, and she's not even 40 yet. And that was scary for sure. But I really believed. I mean, it was uncomfortable for my ex-husband and I at the time, but I really believed in the end it would be better for our family. Yeah. So that was pivotal.
And what did you learn about yourself there?
I mean, I walked away from, like, a career, and I convinced myself that I could be impactful somewhere else, mostly that I could be impactful in the young kids and give them more of me. And I kept saying, to myself, like, you can take a couple of years and see what works out. I really thought I was leaving. Mentally, I'd prepared myself that I was leaving the corporate world. People around me, they were like, there's no way you're not going to do this. So I opened a franchise to a fitness studio in Ladue at Clayton and Lindbergh, which was such a catalyst too, because all of a sudden I'm seeing 400 women. So you're going through this hard time, you're inspiring them. But at some point I felt like the narrative of these women sort of talking to me about where they were going to go to lunch or where they were going to take their second workout class of the day, like after a couple of years, it really was like after 2 years, I knew that there was a piece of me that had done the right thing for my family, but my own career interests were sort of set aside. And that's where, like, luck had it. Somebody put me in contact with Fox. They were launching FS1 and FS2. They hadn't lived in the 24/7 cable world. And foolishly, I went in and was like, yeah, I'll consult. And 3 weeks later, I took a full-time job living in St. Louis, commuting to New York and LA. So it worked out in the sense that I got the kids stable, built an awesome infrastructure of friends back in St. Louis after a big move, kind of let the rockiness of that divorce settle and become really good co-parents together. Yeah. But it was
that's a big deal. So how much do you think self-belief is in there? Like, if you kind of peel the onion layers away, where does that stand, you think, self-belief?
I think it's self-belief and resilience. Like, it's that, again, that conviction of finding inner strength, and it doesn't always come just by yourself. It's certainly the people around you. But I credit my dad a lot to that. I mean, he's not one to sit and listen to you whine. And you'd be, like, going through all this stuff, and he's like, yeah, well, what do you have tomorrow? Like, there was only one option, which was one foot in front of the other. And I guess faith, for sure.
Yep.
You sort of, my gut has always been a really good barometer of truth for me, both in the people I meet or the situations I'm in. And it's sort of how to just figure out.
Yeah. It's funny you said my dad. I've said this in tons of podcasts, but the people you surround yourself with and the books you read, right? Yeah. He always told me that, and it frustrated me, but it's so true. I mean, as I've gotten older, the more good knowledge I'm putting in my brain, right, the better people that I am that are uplifting, that aren't jealous, that aren't doing, and that's what I think about my friend group and the friends I know that you have, the ones that I know. Everybody's excited for everybody.
Yeah.
Right? You're not like, oh, I wish I could do that. And it's like, it just doesn't work, right?
Yeah.
And so how important has that been for you?
I think it's been so important. I mean, you talk about what your dad taught you. Mine was what really leaned into authenticity. And he didn't directly say it to me, but I remember preparing for my first job interviews out of college. And I was like, how should I prepare? I'm going into this ad agency, or I'm going to here. And he's like, just be yourself. Just be yourself. Like
there's nothing more to it?
Yeah, and I failed at that. I mean, especially in the sports world, I'm sure at times I sort of morphed into like locker room talk or what you're supposed to be and adapt. You'd find yourself being the only female in a large boardroom of, high-powered guys. You could have been intimidated or, abrasive, but you had to find sort of the balance in between, and that was really just to be likable.
Yeah.
And the only way I knew how to do that was like, this is who I am. Have some sense of emotional intelligence and kindness, and hope they like you.
Yeah. Did you have any, I'm sure obviously your dad was one of them, but the big mentors in your life, you mentioned it briefly earlier, like, you don't have to name them if you don't want, but like what'd you learn from them, and how important was that for you in your career?
No, I really have. I mean, even I, talked to the owner of the Royals today. Like, each of them at some stage in my career has offered a different level of mentorship and filled a different need. Early on, there was a guy when I was working at Weather Channel and Travel Channel, and I was in Chicago, and I mean, his was like time and kindness, and on the side I babysat his kids, and so I got to see who he was really as a person as well. That drove inspiration of, gosh, I want to be successful, and you want to have a family. Other people would teach me the hard lessons, right? Like, calm down,
Right.
or don't overanalyze so many things, or listen more, don't talk so much, and so those sort of characteristic things, I think, I can't think of a job or experience where there wasn't somebody that played that pivotal role. But you have to calm your mind to sort of welcome them in too, and recognize that somebody is helping you. Like, even here, I'm finding and they don't always have to be someone you like,
right.
But it's also like, what are the lessons you're going to get from someone, and you're able to assess them and say, okay, they're really insecure, and this is why they're acting this way, and so lean in and help them, give them a win. Make them look good.
I think, was it the old saying, the teacher appears when the student is ready? And I think that you were probably ready.
That's right.
And I think that so many times in business, my experience in 24, 25 years, are the people that think they know it all and that think they can't get better, right? So when you hear that, like, how do you stay a student of the game to this day to keep climbing the ranks and doing what you're doing?
I think it's a combination of continuing to find people to learn from, like you talked about, resources, books, podcasts, reading articles, looking ahead at trends and reports. But also it comes from mentoring the younger generation. So I'm going to be passed up, right? And I'm going to get laid off at some point, or worked out of the system. But being there for them to see what's motivating and driving them helps me adapt, because so much of our success is your ability to extract the most out of other people and yourself.
Yep.
And so it's really generationally, and it's even going home. I mean, I feel like I'm the same person I am at home as I go to work, but there's definitely days when that's out of kilter, and you're kind of like, okay, the kids ground you pretty quickly.
They don't care what you do for a living.
No, they
right?
don't care.
Got a ham sandwich on the table or not? What would you say your leadership style is?
I would say that it's definitely. I'm definitely a person that wants to enlist feedback from others. So I usually have an instinct or an idea or something crazy I want to try to execute. But that collaborative approach of really leaning in and learning from others, and then giving them a moment to say, how would you approach this? How would you solve this? Ultimately, I may not follow that direction. So I think it's very collaborative. And probably the thing that's helped me the most in the past 5, 7, 8 years is managing with emotional intelligence. Like, just truly understanding what drives someone else's motivation.
Yep.
Is it money? Is it affirmation? And then use those levers. And it can be exhausting, because if you're managing hundreds of people, there's hundreds of different styles.
Right.
But I really learned that at the Royals. I mean, we had to rebuild a culture, break down, let go of a lot of people, hire a lot of people, and then get them on board to do something that they had never done, and constantly reinvent that every 6 months and every year. So I do feel like I'm pretty good at like a visionary. So I've been blessed to have enough creativity to think ahead. But as you said earlier, like if someone's complacent or they stop learning and they stop wanting to listen, and then I've let others do their thing. And I mean, I really lean in of I do not micromanage. I believe that you need to make mistakes, and I think you've got to learn from those mistakes and assess them. So I try to force people into growth of leadership of their own. Yeah. Because a lot of times they're just too scared to do that, or don't feel like they have the tools to.
What do you think about betting on? I mean, betting on it's probably the wrong word, but believing in people before they believe in themselves. Yeah. And how do you lift them up so all boats rise together?
I think you have to, and at some of that, as you know, maybe the psychology major in me, right, is able to size somebody up fairly quickly or identify something. Or you have to just get to know them as a person. Like, I'm not going to get somebody to perform really well at work if I don't know who they are and ask them about their kids.
And their why. And
I think getting them to do something they're not comfortable with is letting them know there are no repercussions. And so you've got to make sure that you live on that. Like, something could be pretty catastrophic. But I was always like, there's nothing we can't solve, and there were decisions we made that were not good publicly, that may not have been my decision, but it was like, we've got this and we can self-correct.
We own it.
Yeah.
Well, I think the ownership is big, but it also takes courage.
It does.
Right.
It does.
Especially when...
And I don't think you can teach everybody courage.
No.
They don't know that unless they go through that experience enough.
Yeah. I call it your comfort zone callus, right? We all start with a comfort zone this big or whatever, and then if you just break out of it a little bit, right, you just continually do that year after year after year, then your comfort zone all of a sudden now is the size of the table versus the size of a golf ball. And I'm assuming that's what you did, because like with the Royals, you guys had to go in. I'm trying to think, were you there before or after the World Series?
We came in after, and I used to say, I think winning the World Series was one of the best and worst things that could have happened to the franchise, because when you start to sit at the top, you take for granted, whether you take for granted the ticket price of your fans or innovation. And so we came in and the culture was very stifled. It lacked innovation. It was very top heavy. And even it was just like people didn't feel good about things, being there. And so we had to really refine every aspect of the business.
So how do you do that? How do you go back and build the culture? Like, and think about the person that maybe, we have 62, 70 something like people in our firm. So not a huge company, right? But good enough size. How do you continue to build culture and teamwork and that exciting environment?
I think you have to spend a significant amount of time just listening. And, you may feel like it's redundant. You're like, yep, I already know this. I heard this, or this sounds like whining.
Stick to the basics.
But, when we came into the Royals, we spent a good 6 months, myself and the president of the team, just really listening and meeting with people individually one-on-one. They needed to know that they could trust me, which meant that I could not expose them in any sort of personal way that would come back to them, or they would feel victimized, right? And so through that, then it was like little actions. I mean, this sounds crazy, but I got to the Royals, there was no maternity leave.
Oh.
And I'm like, I had to have 2 kids. If I had wanted to have a child while at the Royals, and and so for that one, like, I marched into the owner's office. I was like, this will change tomorrow.
And plus it's illegal.
Yeah, exactly. Other things, they needed to believe in it. So it was like, small lunches, small groups of people. And I had to let my guard down too. And I think there's a fine line as a leader of how much you want to be vulnerable and let them know you, because you don't want to get too close to people that, those boundaries are crossed. But they had to get to know who I was, which means I had to bring my family around and kids, and I had to start pushing for things that I knew were important. Praise and appreciation, sending notes to them saying that we see you, we hear you. And this is where I give John Sherman, the owner of the Royals, a ton of credit. I mean, if I said to him, you need to go walk the halls of the young ticket sellers, and they're 22 years old, and, we called it the bullpen, he's walking down there, meeting them and seeing them. And I think it's
a big deal for a 22-year-old.
It's just that sense of, like, people just want to feel that you recognize what they're doing.
Yeah.
But it's hard, because you get on that hamster wheel of having a lot of things to do, or in that case, the team's not playing well. The pressure starts to become surmountable, you still need to do it.
Can you feel that in the hallways?
Yes, definitely. Oh my God, losing stinks, right?
Yeah.
And so I was there, of the 5.5 years I was there, it was only one real winning season.
Yeah.
Not to mention we went through, a player lockout, COVID for a year and a half. So thinking
fake
of
noise
resiliency.
and the fake fans.
Yeah, I sat with cardboard, heads sitting there, and we couldn't hear anybody else in the stadium.
Yeah, that's wild. Talk about visualization and goal planning. Do you do a lot of that? And
I do.
If so, how do you do that?
I think from a business perspective, I always have a plan. Like, it sounds silly, but I'm a big 30, 60, 90-day plan.
Love it.
And in that plan is what are the things I need to do, and then letting the people know I will need you to help me accomplish this, whether it was open the doors to certain things, whether it was to set new policies or processes. So I am big on that. I'm probably not as good on personal planning. Like, I tend to use either when I sense too much frustration, or I'm complaining, or I'm just like feeling that angst and negativity. That's usually my indication that I need to like reset, replan. And then it's the silly things of, using your kids' calendar, right? Like, we've got summer. What are we going to do in this period of time that both allows me to feel more present? Or it might be a milestone, my daughter going into college, like, we've got to fit all these types of things in. I do write a lot of stuff down. I rarely go back and read it. It's kind of probably just playing over and over in my head again.
You doing college visits yet?
Yeah, we started a couple in the spring, and then we knocked out a couple early, and then we've got a few planned for this summer. She plays field hockey, so once the fall sports season starts, it's kind of hard, but she's, if you think she's like, she's the boss in charge in the family.
She runs the house.
Yeah, she runs the house.
Here's the vision. Here's the plan. Here's what
exactly
we're doing.
Right. Yeah.
That's
She's
awesome.
the adult.
Any crowd favorites yet for college?
Oh my gosh, if she had her way, and it's totally impossible, her favorite's UNC Chapel Hill.
Yeah. And playing field hockey there?
No, she's decided at the beginning of her junior year she wasn't going to play, that she didn't want that to define where she went to school. She's really versatile and likes a ton of things, but she also loves sports, so she wants
pretty cool
an
spot.
Environment where sports is a big part of the culture of the school. So when you went there, right, everybody's wearing their team gear, and you walk even into the Cane's Chicken, and it's decked out like UNC. But the reality is that when you really get to it, they accept like 1% of out-of-state non-athletes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So either North Carolina or an athlete. You can shoot a basketball really well.
That's right.
Can we talk about gambling on television anymore?
For sure. Missouri's not legal. I know. We keep holding ourselves back.
We're sitting in Illinois, though. So
you're legal. Looks like
gamble.
It will be active in December is what I heard.
What takes so long? That's be 13 months at that point. Yeah, God bless them.
My friend Denny Hoskins.
Yeah. I don't know Denny, but Denny's one passing
he's he's been in opposition of it. And I think there's a lot of misperceptions about where the funds are actually going to go when in reality a significant portion of them go to support education.
Right.
But there was also, a lot of disparity between originally what the casinos wanted and new licensed operators coming. I think it's good for the sports. I think you have to you have to be really responsible about it. So, for example, on our network, we're called FanDuel Sports Network because a lot of sports fans happen to play fantasy sports. They like predictable games. Eventually, they may be driving over to Illinois to gamble. But it will never be an environment that someone that doesn't like sports betting is going to feel like they've got to tune out from the content.
Yeah, because there's too much stuff or whatever. Yeah.
So I think it'll eventually direct you into an interactive environment that allows you, if you are a sports bettor and you're betting on the Cardinals, you might be able to watch the game and be gambling on a second screen or within what feels like one screen. It's
pretty wild.
It's wild. But think about it. Most people are just using their phone to gamble all the time. And think how many things you're scrolling through in one day.
Yeah. Well, you put those little stats, you watch it now, you get the little stats up there. And thankfully, I'm not a big gambler, but I'm like, man, you can see where this could be fun. Just betting on stuff.
My 16-year-old boy, Ben's like, hey, Tom, like, let's put a bet down on this. I was like, let's not.
Let's put $2 on this one.
It's your own money.
Yeah, that's funny. Because Bill DeWitt III sat in that same chair probably about a year ago, and he was talking about, he is great. But, just take and I keep talking about the Cardinals. I know you're dealing with the Royals, but same thing for them, right? But he's like, our friends up north, the pinstripes, white and blue, the Cubs, right? He goes, I don't know what they make, but let's say they make $25 million a year on their gambling stuff.
Yeah.
there's your starting pitcher.
That's right.
Right? Whereas here you go 12 miles, 16 miles that way, and he can't do that.
Yeah.
Like, and then people want to bitch that you don't have this pitcher. And it's like, we're not fighting the same fight.
No, you hit the nail on the head. So teams only, really, we call it local controllable revenue. And the sources of that local controllable revenue really comes from your media partnerships, your ticket and parking, your retail and concessions. And so you have to look for alternative sources of revenue. In the NFL, where they have such significant media rights, each NFL team's getting $350 million before the season starts from the league office. The baseball teams are not. So also in Bill's example, what he's been able to do from a real estate perspective and have the district where you have the vibrancies of bars and hotels that you can generate, other economic sources from or other revenue from, but not every ballpark has that opportunity.
Right.
So the sports betting is big from an integration perspective, certainly integration fees even, but also like in the world of sports, of corporate partnerships. Very rarely are you getting a new category of business that comes into play that allows you to expand that revenue.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people think that the owners are collecting that money and putting it in their pockets, as Bill probably told you. It goes right back into the play of the
100%.
field. And when you're in a small market team, until they can kind of correct economic reform, you need every source of revenue you can get.
Right. So, and I think it's important when people listen to this, the local people especially. So when they walk into Ballpark Village and they buy the beer or the hamburger or they go to the Hall of Fame thing or whatever they're doing, or they stay at the Lowe's Hotel there, that money in theory is helping the team.
It absolutely is.
Right.
So these teams, it really is about economic development. It's jobs, it's the sales tax that's generated. Think about the players. It's player, income tax, sales tax, all of those things play into this, which allows us to attract more businesses, which allows us to use the sports commission to attract more events. And without that, if we remain complacent, downtown itself will be run down. So these teams are constantly putting energy and revenue back into the market. Those dollars are going to come back in ways that a fan may not see from a baseball field, but they're certainly going to feel and see that through their kids or the experiences that they have.
And I know, and what it kind of annoys me because it's like we live in America. It's capitalism, and they're like, oh, they're billionaires and they should just do this and write these checks. I'm like, yeah, but ththey're putting like all of their family wealth on the line to build buildings and stuff, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
And, a lot of people think, the return on owning a baseball team. You're not going to see and feel that for many, many years.
Yeah. Well, what about the tickets? So, and you can pick on the Royals, Cardinals, whoever, because, you see on TV now, oh, nobody's showing up to the games, blah, 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 right? And then, but isn't there a large percentage of those tickets already bought when the season starts or not?
It varies by team. So the Cardinals have a much larger season ticket fan base than, say, the Royals.
Okay.
I think the name of the game is that you have to find an option that feels attainable to every type of fan, which means that the sports teams have to be more flexible. So what we're all moving towards is less reliancy on a season ticket member. For you to go to 81 baseball games and hold those 4 tickets is a lot, much less a suite that has 18 people in it, right? But as a fan, you might want to experience 6 or 8 different locations in a stadium in any given year. Take a friend, take a business associate. And so now it's all about flexibility. You want to buy what you want when you want it, and you want to make sure that if you can't go to those games, you can resell those tickets. So they had to put better controls in on the secondary marketplace to make sure that the value stayed there for season ticket members. And now you're seeing things like, hey, here's this $1,000 flex tick bank. So Brett, you can choose, you want to sit in the green seats tonight, you want to sit in the Coca-Cola patio. You spend the money how you want. You might want to take 20 people, you might want to take 1 person. I think and you're seeing that across all professional sports.
That's cool.
And even international sports.
Because it's like everything in life right now. You want an experience.
Yeah. And I think in baseball, you've got to make it special for them. So it has to be something more than the win and loss on the field.
Yep.
And I think people right now are just complaining because they feel like ownership hasn't done this or has done this. There's always something to complain about, but if you're looking for a great fun experience, go visit different areas of the ballpark. Or now we've got those 4 teams downtown.
I went Sunday and I visited like 4 different areas just because you could.
Yeah,
like
I don't want to sit in my seat for 2 hours and 45 minutes. I want to get up and go see friends or family.
Well, I made the first mistake of this, how much I guess I don't pay attention to the Dodgers, but we wanted to see Ohtani.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, you know what? He plays right field. I'll buy some right field bleacher tickets. We've not sat out there before, so we bought them. And then I'm like, oh, he's a DH. So then we walked around and sat closer to the So
were you there when Kershaw pitched at least?
We were, yeah.
So he pitched almost 5 innings. That's fun to see.
It was great.
Yeah.
And then, Ohtani got smoked by a fastball right in the ankle, but he's all right, I guess. So talk about some of the moments in your career that stick out the most for you. You've probably met some pretty cool people. Anything stick out for you is like, man, this is a pinch me moment?
You know, I would define it like as the experiences. It sounds crazy, but one of the most memorable, probably a couple that stick out. I was at the Rose Bowl when Vince Young played Matt Leinart in the BCS champ game, and if you remember, super close game. But it was about everything else I was around. Like, we were with some of our best friends from work. The weather was amazing. We had fun clients. So that stands out for sure. I've been so fortunate. Like, my jobs have allowed me pretty ridiculous
cool
access.
Stuff. Right.
So we were at the Masters and attended, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and we're standing probably as far as you and I are when Tiger won the Masters.
Oh, wow.
And his purple shirt and all that stuff. That was pretty exciting. That was just Tom and I together, and I was actually transitioning from Fox to the Royals. I crazy found my way to the World Cup in Russia, both petrifying and, exhilarating at the same time.
Yeah.
So that was crazy.
They give you security for that?
Yeah, we did.
Okay.
And then, like, my best female sports moment was the United States women's team won the World Cup in Vancouver. And I had never participated in the whole, like, fandom of, I can't even think of what they're called, and I should know this. But, I mean, we walked for miles through the street, and everyone's painted red, white, and blue. And it happened to be 4th of July weekend. It was coming right off 4th of July weekend. That was pretty incredible. That was the first moment that I'd seen my kids and my son even be so excited about a female sports event. My first baseball, like, wild card clinch, being in the locker room, champagne, Sally's pouring stuff, and we're drinking out of stuff. Who knows how many miles have been on that, but it was so fun, and I have that in my office. So
goggles or no goggles?
I had no goggles.
There you go.
Yeah, no, just a pink satin coat that wasn't really waterproof, but it
ruined it. Never wore it again. Now it's hanging up somewhere. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Sarah, for being on the podcast. This is a ton of takeaways for me, and I know for our listeners as well. So thank you for being transparent, and thanks for being on the Circuit of Success.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.